The ink in the Mont Blanc pen was worth more than most people's cars, but the signature it was about to scrawl was worth billions, and perhaps a few lives. Damien Moretti, the man they called the Architect, sat at the head of the table, his eyes cold, his hand steady. The room was silent, save for the hum of the air conditioning and the nervous breathing of the men around him. He lowered the nib to the paper. It was done. The merger of the century. Until a trembling hand placed a glass of water next to him, and a voice, barely audible, shattered the silence. "Don't sign this. Look at the date on page 4. Damien froze. He didn't look up. He didn't speak. He simply capped the pen. What happened next didn't just surprise everyone. It turned the entire criminal underworld of New York City upside down. The private dining room at L'Obsidienne smelled of truffle oil, old leather, and fear. It was the kind of establishment where the menu didn't list prices, and the staff were trained to be as invisible as the oxygen the patrons breathed. Samira Jenkins adjusted her apron, her knuckles white as she gripped the tray. She wasn't supposed to be working the VIP section tonight. That was usually reserved for Henri, the head waiter, who had the uncanny ability to pour vintage Bordeaux while ignoring the fact that the men at the table were discussing how to dismantle a shipping union. But Henri had come down with a sudden violent flu an hour before the reservation, and Samira, with her college loans looming and her rent overdue, had volunteered. She regretted it the moment the group walked in. There were 6 of them. 5 were dressed in suits that cost more than Samira's entire education. The 6th man, the one they all pivoted around, like planets orbiting a dark sun, was Damien Moretti. Samira knew the name. Everyone in the city knew the name, though it rarely appeared in the papers. When it did, it was usually buried in the business section under innocuous headlines like "Construction Magnate Expands Portfolio." But on the streets, in the whispers of the busboys and the late-night bodega clerks, Moretti was the Don of the East Coast. He was terrifyingly handsome in a sharp, angular way, dark hair, swept-back eyes the color of burnt espresso, and a jawline that looked like it could cut glass. "Wine," Damien said. He didn't look at the waiter. He was staring at the man across from him. "Of course, sir," Samira murmured. Her hands shook slightly as she uncorked the 1982 Petrus. Across from Damien sat Victor Cray. If Damien was a sleek panther, Cray was a hyena. He was older, heavier, with a smile that showed too many teeth. He was Moretti's rival, the head of the Port Authority racket, and tonight was supposed to be a peace treaty, a merger of interests. "You're making the right choice." Dom Cray said, his voice grating like gravel in a blender. "The unions are squeezing us. We combine the logistics, we cut them out. Clean, simple." Damien didn't smile. He flipped through the document on the table. It was thick, bound in heavy cream paper. "Arthur has reviewed this." Arthur Pendleton, Damien's longtime lawyer, and the man Samira had seen sweating profusely in the hallway earlier, nodded vigorously. "Yes, Damien. It's standard. Exactly what we discussed last week. The liability clauses are ironclad." Samira moved around the table, pouring the wine. She tried to make herself small to be part of the furniture. But as she reached Arthur's side, she noticed something. Arthur's hands were trembling. Not a little, a lot. He was gripping his napkin so hard his knuckles were yellow. And when Samira glanced down at the document lying open in front of Damien, her heart hammered against her ribs. Samira wasn't just a waitress. She was a dropout, a third-year law student who had to leave Columbia when her father got sick. She knew contracts. She knew how they looked, how they felt, and most importantly, she knew how they could be weaponized. She poured wine into Arthur's glass, and her eyes caught the text on the open page. It was the indemnity clause. But it was wrong. The formatting was slightly off the font size, a fraction smaller than the rest. It wasn't standard boilerplate. Waiving all rights to asset retention in the event of federal indictment. It was a suicide pill. If Damien signed this, and if Cray or someone else tipped off the feds, Damien wouldn't just lose the deal. He would lose everything. His legitimate businesses, his properties, his accounts. It was a complete transfer of assets disguised as a liability shield, and Arthur, his lawyer, was letting him sign it. Samira felt a cold sweat prickle her neck. Walk away, a voice in her head screamed. This isn't your world. These men kill people for looking at them wrong. She moved to Damien's side. He picked up his pen. It was a heavy black lacquer instrument. The room went silent. Cray was leaning forward, his eyes hungry. Arthur was staring at his water glass, refusing to look at his boss. Damien removed the cap. The scratch of the metal against the paper was imminent. Samira's father had always told her she had a saving people thing. It was why she wanted to be a lawyer. It was why she was broke. It was why she couldn't move her feet toward the kitchen. She stepped in, reaching for his water glass to refill it, even though it was full. More water, sir? She asked. Damien paused, annoyed. He looked up at her, his eyes narrowing. It's full. Samira leaned in ostensibly to adjust the placement of the glass. Her face was inches from his ear. She smelled expensive cologne and danger. Don't sign this. She whispered the words barely a breath. Page 4. The indemnity clause. It transfers your assets upon indictment. Your lawyer knows. She pulled back instantly, picking up the empty bread basket. As a cover, her heart thumping so hard she thought it might bruise her ribs. Damien didn't flinch. He didn't gasp. He didn't look at her. He stared at the paper. The silence stretched for 10 seconds. To Samira, it felt like 10 years. Is there a problem, Dom? Cray asked, his smile faltering. Pen run out of ink. Damien slowly put the cap back on the pen. The click was loud like a gunshot in a canyon. Arthur, Damien said softly. The lawyer jumped. Yes, Damien. Read page 4 for me. Out loud. The colour drained from Arthur Pendleton's face so fast he looked like a corpse that had been left out in the rain. Page 4, Arthur stammered. Damien, we've been over this. It's just the standard liability waive. Read it, Damien said. His voice hadn't raised a decibel, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. If it's standard, you shouldn't have trouble reading it to our friend Victor here. Victor Cray's eyes darted from Damien to Arthur. The hunger in his face was replaced by a sharp, calculating wariness. He signaled to one of his guards standing by the door. Arthur's hands shook so badly he couldn't turn the page. Damien, please. I might have picked up the wrong draft. There were several versions. The wrong draft, Damien repeated. He stood up. The movement was fluid, graceful and terrifying. Damien Moretti was 6'3" of coiled muscle, and when he stood, he dominated the space. He picked up the contract and tossed it toward Cray. You think I'm stupid, Victor? Cray stood up his chair, scraping loudly against the floor. I don't know what you're talking about, Moretti. Your lawyer drafted it. With your ink, Damien countered. He looked at Arthur. How much did they pay you? Arthur, was it enough to cover the funeral costs? Arthur began to sob. Damien, they have my wife. They have Linda. Please, I didn't have a choice. There's always a choice, Damien said coldly. The air in the room shifted instantly from tension to violence. Cray's hand went inside his jacket. Kill him, Cray barked. Damien was faster. He didn't reach for a gun. He reached for the steak knife on his plate. In one motion, he drove it through Cray's hand, pinning it to the mahogany table. Cray screamed a guttural sound that tore through the restaurant's elegance. Gunfire erupted. Glass shattered. Samira screamed and dropped to the floor, covering her head with her arms. The elegant dining room turned into a war zone. Damien flipped the heavy oak table onto its side, using it as a shield against the bullets coming from the door. "Get down!" Damien roared, pulling a sleek silver pistol from a holster at the small of his back. He fired 2 shots over the barricade, efficient controlled double taps. 2 of Cray's men dropped. Samira was hyperventilating, curled in a ball near the overturned table. She felt a strong hand grab her arm. "Up, now!" She looked up into Damien's eyes. They were wild, fueled by adrenaline, but focused. I can't," she stammered. "You stay here, you die," Damien said flatly. "You whispered in my ear, sweetheart. You picked a side. Now you have to live with it." He yanked her to her feet. Bullets chipped the plaster off the wall, inches from her head. Samira shrieked, stumbling forward. Damien kept his body between her and the shooters, firing back with terrifying precision. "The kitchen!" Samira yelled, her survival instinct finally kicking in. "The back exit leads to the alley. Lead the way." They sprinted toward the kitchen swing doors. Samira crashed through them, Damien right on her heels. The kitchen staff was in chaos, chefs and sous chefs diving under stainless steel counters. Pans clattered to the floor. They burst out into the cool night air of the alleyway. A black SUV was idling there, Cray's backup likely. Damien didn't hesitate. He shot the driver through the windshield before the man could even raise his weapon. He shoved Samira toward a nondescript grey sedan, parked 3 cars down his own emergency vehicle. "Get in." Samira scrambled into the passenger seat. Damien vaulted into the driver's side, keyed the ignition, and the engine roared to life. He slammed the car into reverse, spinning it 180 degrees with a screech of burning rubber, and floored it onto the main avenue. Samira gripped the dashboard, her breathing coming in jagged gasps. She looked at the man beside her. He was calm now, checking the mirrors, his gun resting on his lap. "Who are you?" Damien asked, not looking at her. "Waitresses don't know about indemnity clauses." "Samira," she managed to say. "Samira Jenkins. I was a law student." Damien glanced at her. A flicker of something, respect, perhaps, or curiosity crossed his face. "Well, Samira Jenkins," he said, taking a sharp turn that threw her against the door. "Congratulations, you just saved my life, and in doing so, you've effectively ended your own." "What? What do you mean?" "Cray saw you. His men saw you. You're not a waitress anymore, Samira. You're a liability to them and an asset to me. You can't go home. You can't go to your job. You belong to the game now." Samira stared out the window as the city lights blurred into streaks of neon. She thought of her apartment, her cat, her unpaid bills. All of it felt like a distant memory from a different life. "Where are we going?" she whispered. Damien accelerated, merging onto the highway, headed north away from the city. "To the only place safe enough to figure out how I'm going to kill Victor Cray without getting us both murdered first." The drive took 3 hours. They left the concrete sprawl of New York and headed deep into the Catskills. The silence in the car was heavy, broken only by the rhythmic thrum of the tires on the asphalt. Damien had tossed Samira's phone out the window 10 miles outside the city. "Trackers," he had said simply. Now they were pulling up a long, winding gravel driveway surrounded by dense pines. The house at the top wasn't a cabin. It was a fortress of glass and stone, cantilevered over a rushing creek. Damien killed the engine. The darkness here was absolute, save for the motion sensor lights that flickered on as they approached the heavy oak door. "Inside," Damien ordered. "Don't touch anything electronic. No TV, no landline." Samira stepped into the foyer. It was minimalist, cold, and undeniably masculine. A fire was already crackling in the hearth gas, remote-controlled, she assumed. "Sit," Damien said, pointing to a leather armchair. He went to a sideboard and poured 2 drinks. Amber liquid splashed into crystal tumblers. He walked over and handed one to her. "Drink. It'll stop the shaking." Samira took the glass. Her hands were still trembling. She took a sip. It was whiskey smooth, but with a bite that burned her throat. Damien sat opposite her on the coffee table, leaning forward, his elbows on his knees. The gun was gone, but the intensity remained. "Why?" he asked. Samira looked up. "Why what?" "Why did you speak up? You could have walked away. Poured the water, let me sign my life away, and gone home to your whatever life you have." Samira swirled the whiskey. "My father." Damien's brow furrowed. "Your father?" "His name was Thomas Jenkins. He owned a small construction firm in Jersey. About 5 years ago, he got a contract for the docks. He was so happy. He thought it was his big break." Samira's voice tightened. He didn't know he was doing business with a shell company owned by Victor Cray. They buried a liability clause in his contract, just like the one tonight. When the EPA came down on them for dumping waste, the shell company dissolved, and the liability transferred to my dad. She looked Damien in the eye. He lost everything. The house, his pension, his reputation. He had a stroke 6 months later from the stress. He died in a state-run nursing home because we couldn't afford anything else. Damien watched her, his expression unreadable. "I recognized the wording," Samira continued. "It was the exact same phrasing. Federal indictment, asset retention. I couldn't watch him do it to someone else. Not even to you." Damien sat back. He looked at the ceiling, then back at her. "So, this is personal for you." "I guess it is," Samira said. "Good," Damien said. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out into the pitch-black woods. "Because Arthur Pendleton is going to tell Cray everything he knows about my operation to save his wife. By morning, my accounts will be frozen, my known associates will be targeted, and there will be a price on my head, the size of a small country's GDP." He turned back to her, a grim smile playing on his lips. "I need a lawyer, Samira. One who isn't in the pockets of the 5 families. One who has a grudge." Samira blinked. "You can't be serious. I didn't even pass the bar." "I don't need you to argue in court," Damien said, walking toward her. He stopped inches away, looking down at her. "I need you to find the loopholes in Cray's empire. You know his contracts. You know his shell games because you studied them for your father. I'm going to bring you the documents, the ones I've stolen over the years, but never had the time to decode. You're going to find me a way to legally cripple him while I physically dismantle him. And if I say no, then I give you $10,000 and a bus ticket to Ohio, and you spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder." Samira looked at the whiskey in her glass. She thought of her father, pale and defeated in that hospital bed. She thought of the smug look on Cray's face before Damien put a knife through his hand. She downed the rest of the drink and set the glass down with a definitive clink. "I hate Ohio," Samira said. Damien smiled. It was the first real smile she had seen on him, dazzling and dangerous. "Welcome to the family, Samira." 2 days later. The safe house was no longer quiet. It had become a war room. Tables were covered in blueprints, financial ledgers, and stacks of hard drives. Samira had barely slept. She was running on adrenaline and Damien's espresso machine. She was knee-deep in a stack of Cray's offshore accounts when Damien walked in. He was wearing a holster over a tight black t-shirt, his phone pressed to his ear. "I don't care," Damien barked into the phone. "Burn it! If they found the warehouse, burn it all. I won't let Cray take the inventory." He hung up and threw the phone onto the couch. He looked exhausted. There was a bandage on his forearm where a stray piece of glass had cut him during the exit from the restaurant. "Bad news?" Samira asked, without looking up from the ledger. "Cray is moving faster than I thought. He hit 2 of my distribution centers this morning. He knows my logistical routes." Damien ran a hand through his hair. Someone is feeding him real-time intel. Someone close. Samira paused. Closer than Arthur. Arthur knew the legal side. He didn't know the street routes. This is someone in my inner circle, my captains. Damien walked over to the table and looked at her work. "Find anything?" "Yes," Samira said. She pointed to a highlighted column. "Cray isn't just washing money. He's leveraging it. He's using the pension funds of the dock workers to secure loans for high-risk real estate. If the real estate market dips even a fraction, the pensions vanish. He's gambling with their retirement," Damien muttered. "Classic Victor. But here's the catch," Samira said, her eyes lighting up. "To secure those loans, he had to list a guarantor." "Look who it is." Damien leaned in. "Ethelgard Holdings." "And do you know who owns Ethelgard Holdings?" Samira asked. "No." "Arthur Pendleton," Samira said. Damien stiffened. "Arthur. It's a shell within a shell. Arthur isn't just Cray's pawn. He's his partner. He wasn't forced to betray you, Damien. He's been helping Cray build this for years. The crying act at the restaurant. It was a performance to buy him time." Damien's face darkened. A vein pulsed in his temple. "He told me they had his wife." "His wife filed for divorce 3 years ago. She lives in Paris," Samira said, tapping a printed dossier she had pulled from a public records database. Damien slammed his fist onto the table, making the papers jump. "I'm going to kill him." "You can't just kill him," Samira said, standing up to meet his gaze. "If you kill him, the structure holds. His shares just transfer to a trust. You need to destroy the trust first." "How?" "We need Arthur's physical signature key. It's a digital encryption dongle. Lawyers at that level use them to authorize massive transfers. If we get that key, I can authorize a transfer of the guaranteed assets back to the pension funds. Cray defaults on the loans. The bank seizes his properties. He's bankrupt in 24 hours. Damien looked at her with a new intensity. "You want to rob Arthur Pendleton? I want to break them," Samira said fiercely. Damien stared at her for a long moment. The chemistry between them, usually simmering beneath layers of fear and duty, suddenly spiked. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered on her jaw. "You're dangerous, Samira Jenkins." "I learned from the best," she whispered. The moment was magnetic. Damien leaned in his lips inches from hers. Samira's breath hitched. Suddenly the lights in the house cut out. Darkness swallowed them. "Down!" Damien hissed, tackling her to the floor, just as the front window shattered inward. Flashes of light illuminated the room. Gunfire. "They found us," Damien growled, covering her body with his. "How the hell did they find us?" "The phone," Samira realized. "You used the phone. It was encrypted." "Encryption doesn't matter if they have a voice print match on the network," Samira yelled over the noise of shattering glass. Damien cursed. He rolled off her, pulling his gun. "Stay low. Crawl to the bathroom. Cast iron tub. Get in it." "Where are you going?" "I'm going to buy us some time." Damien moved into the darkness, a shadow hunting shadows. Samira crawled across the floor glass, slicing into her palms. She reached the bathroom and scrambled into the heavy tub. She heard shouts downstairs. Then a voice she recognized. "Domo, come on out. Dom Arthur says hello." It was Cray's voice. He was here. Samira clutched her knees. She heard Damien return fire 3 shots, then silence, then 2 more, then a loud crash, like a door being kicked in. "Clear left, clear right." Footsteps were thundering up the stairs. Samira looked around the bathroom. There was a small window high up. It was too small for Damien, but maybe... No, she wasn't leaving him. She spotted a bottle of bleach and a bottle of ammonia under the sink. A desperate chemical idea formed in her mind. She grabbed them both and crawled to the doorway. Damien was backed into the hallway, firing at the stairs. He was pinned. "Damien!" she screamed. He glanced back. "I told you to hide! Cover your face!" Samira hurled the open bottle of bleach, then the ammonia down the stairwell where the men were bunching up. The liquid smashed and mixed on the landing. Chloramine gas. It wasn't instant death, but in a confined space, it was blinding, choking hell. Coughing and retching erupted from the stairs. Men screamed, clawing at their eyes and throats. "Go now!" Samira yelled. Damien didn't argue. He grabbed her hand and they ran to the master bedroom. He threw open the balcony doors. "Jump! Are you crazy? It's a 2-story drop. Into the creek, aim for the water." They leapt into the black void. The water hit them like a sledgehammer of ice. Samira didn't even have time to scream before the freezing current of the creek swallowed her whole. The blackness was absolute. The water was turbulent, swollen from recent rains, and it tumbled her over and over, stripping the breath from her lungs. She tumbled blindly, her limbs striking rocks, the roar of the water deafening her. "I'm going to die," she thought. "I escaped the bullets just to drown in the dark." Then a hand clamped around her arm. It was like an iron vice. "Damien." He hauled her upward with strength that seemed impossible given the circumstances. They broke the surface together, gasping for air, only to be slapped in the face by the rushing water. "Kick!" Damien roared over the sound of the rapids. "Kick toward the bank!" Samira kicked. Her legs felt heavy, her jeans weighing her down like lead anchors. Damien didn't let go. He kept one arm around her waist, using his powerful legs to fight the current, steering them diagonally toward the muddy shoreline. They slammed into the bank. Damien shoved her up onto the mud, then dragged himself out after her. They collapsed in the tall grass, coughing up water, shivering violently. Above them, on the cliff edge near the house, flashlight beams cut through the night sky. They could hear the faint barking of dogs. We can't stay!" Damien gasped, rolling onto his back. He was soaked, his black shirt clinging to his chest. "They'll bring the dogs down here." Samira tried to stand, but her knees buckled. "I can't feel my feet." Damien stood up. He grabbed her hand and pulled her up, not gently, but with urgency. "Move, Samira. You stop, you freeze. You freeze, you die. Move." They stumbled into the tree line. The forest was dense, a tangle of pine and thorny underbrush that tore at their clothes. Damien took the lead, holding her hand so tightly her fingers went numb. He navigated the darkness by instinct, moving with the stealth of a predator. They walked for what felt like hours. The adrenaline began to fade, replaced by the gnawing, bone-deep ache of hypothermia. Samira's teeth were chattering so hard her jaw ached. "Damien," she stammered. I have to stop." He stopped and turned. In the faint moonlight filtering through the canopy, his face was pale, his lips blue. He touched her cheek. His hand was freezing. "There's a hunting blind," he said, his voice rough. "About 1/2 mile east. I used to hunt here with my father. If it's still standing, we can rest." "1/2 mile," she whispered. It sounded like a marathon. "Come on." He didn't just hold her hand this time. He wrapped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her body heat against his. They marched on a single, shivering entity in the vast, indifferent woods. The hunting blind was little more than a wooden shack raised on stilts, but it had a roof and 4 walls. Damien kicked the rotting door open and ushered her inside. It smelled of mildew and old pine needles, but it was dry. "Clothes," Damien ordered. "Off, now." Samira blinked sluggishly. "What? You're going hypothermic. Wet clothes will kill you in 20 minutes. Take them off." He was already stripping off his soaked shirt, revealing a torso mapped with scars, some old and faded, others fresh and pink. He unbuckled his belt. Under any other circumstances, Samira would have been mortified. Now she was just cold. Her fingers were too clumsy to work the buttons of her blouse. Damien saw her struggling. He knelt before her. "Let me." His hands were efficient, devoid of anything suggestive, yet the intimacy of it burned through the cold. He unbuttoned her shirt, peeled the wet fabric from her skin, and helped her out of her jeans. She stood shivering in her underwear, her skin covered in goosebumps. Damien tossed his jacket leather, and therefore slightly drier on the inside, onto the floor. "Lie down," he said. He lay down next to her and pulled the jacket over them as best he could. Then he wrapped his arms around her, pulling her back against his chest, tangling his legs with hers. "Body heat," he murmured against her ear. "It's the only way." Samira lay frozen, her heart hammering against her ribs. He was so hard, so solid. Slowly the warmth began to return. It started at her core and spread to her extremities. The shivering subsided into intermittent tremors. "You knew," Damien said softly into the darkness. "About the shell companies. You figured out Arthur's play in 2 days. It took me 10 years to build that empire, and you dissected it in 48 hours. "I told you," Samira whispered. "I learned from my dad's mistakes." "You're wasted as a waitress, Samira, and you're wasted as a criminal," she retorted, emboldened by the returning warmth. "You wanted to sign that merger to get out, didn't you? Legitimize the business." Damien stiffened slightly. "The Moretti name has been soaked in blood for 3 generations. I wanted to be the one to wash it clean. That merger was the exit ramp. Construction, logistics, shipping, all legal. No more bodies. And Arthur stole that from you. He didn't just steal the money." Damien growled, his arm tightening around her waist. "He stole the redemption. He kept me in the mud." Samira turned in his arms so she was facing him. It was too dark to see his eyes clearly, but she could feel his breath on her face. "We can get it back," she said. "We get the key. We transfer the assets. You can still get out." "It's not about the money anymore," Damien said. "It's about making them pay." "We can do both." Damien moved his hand up her back, his thumb tracing the line of her spine. The air in the tiny shack shifted. The danger outside felt 1,000,000 miles away. All that existed was the heat between them. "You should sleep," Damien said, though he didn't pull away. "I can't." He leaned in. His lips brushed hers, tentative at first, a question. Samira answered it by pressing closer her hands, finding the bare skin of his shoulders. The kiss deepened, becoming hungry, desperate. It was a release of all the fear, the adrenaline, the proximity of death. For a few hours in a rotting shack in the middle of nowhere, they weren't a waitress and a mafia boss. They were just 2 people keeping the cold at bay. The next morning. Sunlight sliced through the cracks in the wooden walls. Samira woke up alone. Panic surged for a split second before the door creaked open. Damien stepped in. He had put his damp clothes back on. He held a handful of berries and a plastic bottle of water he must have salvaged from his car before the crash, though she didn't remember him grabbing it. "Breakfast," he said grimly. "We need to move. I hiked to the ridge. I saw a cruiser on the main road. State troopers. Cray has them on payroll." Samira dressed quickly, grimacing as the damp denim clung to her legs. "How do we get back to the city without a car?" We steal one, Damien said. There's a trailhead parking lot, 2 miles south. Hikers. Weekend warriors from the city. The hike was brutal, but the promise of revenge fueled them. They found a Subaru Outback parked at the trailhead. The owner, a man in expensive hiking gear, was busy stretching by the map board. Damien didn't use a gun. He walked up to the man, asked for the time, and before the guy could check his watch, Damien delivered a swift, precise punch to the jaw. The man crumbled. "Get his keys," Damien told Samira. Samira patted the unconscious man's pockets, her hands shaking. She found the fob. "Got it." They were on the highway in 5 minutes. Back in New York City. They didn't go to Manhattan. Damien drove them to Queens, to an industrial district of auto body shops and scrapyards. He pulled the Subaru into a garage marked Salvatore's Auto. The bay door rolled down behind them, plunging them into shadow. A woman walked out from the office. She was in her 50s with grey steel hair pulled back in a severe bun, wearing grease-stained coveralls. She held a wrench like a weapon. "You look like hell, Dom," she said, her voice raspy. "Good to see you too, Ma," Damien said. Samira's eyes widened. "Ma, not his mother," the woman grunted. "God forbid. I'm Martha. I fixed his first bike. Now I fix his messes." She looked at Samira. "Who's the stray?" "This is Samira. She's legal counsel." Martha snorted. "She looks like she rolled down a mountain." "We need a clean car, fresh clothes, and a laptop with a secure connection," Damien said. "And I need you to reach out to the ghost." Martha dropped the wrench. It clattered loudly on the concrete. "The ghost, Dom, you know he doesn't work for the families anymore. Not since the 08 purge." "He owes me," Damien said. "Tell him I'm cashing in the favor for the sister." Martha's expression softened. She nodded. "Go upstairs. Shower, I'll burn these clothes." Upstairs, in the small apartment above the garage, Samira finally scrubbed the mud and river water from her skin. When she came out, wrapped in a towel, Damien was already dressed in jeans and a black hoodie Martha had provided. He was typing furiously on a laptop. "I found him," Damien said. "Cray." "Arthur," Damien corrected. "We have a window. A very small, very dangerous window." Samira walked over to the screen. It was an invitation digital flyer. The Metropolitan Legal Aid Charity Gala. Saturday night. The Plaza Hotel. "He's going to be there?" Samira asked. "He's the guest of honor," Damien said, pointing to the text. "Honoring Arthur Pendleton for his lifetime of service. The irony is sickening." "He'll be surrounded by security," Samira noted. "And Cray's men." "Exactly," Damien said. "He'll feel safe. He'll have the digital key on him. He never lets it out of his sight, especially now that he knows I'm coming for him. He wears it on a platinum chain around his neck. So we just walk into the plaza, past the metal detectors, past the bodyguards, and snatch a necklace off the guest of honor?" Samira asked incredulously. "That's suicide." "We don't snatch it," Damien said, turning to look at her. His eyes were cold, calculating, and fierce. "We make him give it to us." "How?" "We need to get you inside," Damien said. "Not as a waitress, and not as a lawyer." "Then as what?" Damien looked her up and down. "As the one thing Arthur Pendleton has a weakness for. A damsel in distress with a secret." "I don't understand." "Arthur thinks you're dead," Damien explained. "Cray told him we died in the river. If you walk into that gala looking like a ghost, looking like $1 million, he won't be scared. He'll be curious. Arthur is arrogant. He thinks he's untouchable. He'll want to know how you survived. He'll want to know what you know. You want me to bait him? I want you to lure him into a private room. I'll handle the rest." Samira looked at the screen, then at Damien. "I need a dress," she said. Damien smirked. Martha's already on it. And Damien. Yeah, if this goes south, she said, her voice steady. If we get caught, I won't let them take you, Damien vowed. I promise. Samira nodded. She was terrified, but beneath the fear was a strange, cold resolve. She wasn't the girl who dropped the tray anymore. She was the woman who poisoned a stairwell with mustard gas. Let's go crash a party, she said. The Plaza Hotel was a beacon of golden light against the New York night. Limousines lined the curb, depositing the city's elite senators, judges, tech moguls, and the predators who fed on them. Samira Jenkins stepped out of a hired town car. She didn't look like a waitress who scraped tips to pay rent. She looked like a weapon. Martha had outdone herself. The dress was a deep blood-red silk that clung to every curve backless and daring, with a slit that ran high up her thigh. Her hair was swept up in an elegant chignon, revealing the long line of her neck. But the most expensive thing she wore was her expression, absolute, icy confidence. She wore an earpiece, hidden by her hair. Radio check. Damien's voice came through clear and deep. He was close somewhere in the shadows of the service corridors, moving through the veins of the hotel. Loud and clear, Samira murmured, flashing a dazzling smile at the doorman as she handed him her invitation, forged, of course. She walked into the grand ballroom. The air smelled of expensive perfume and champagne. A string quartet played softly in the corner. Under the crystal chandeliers, hundreds of guests mingled. It didn't take long to find him. Arthur Pendleton stood near the ice sculpture, holding a glass of scotch. He looked flushed victorious. He was laughing at a joke made by a federal judge. Around his neck, visible just above the knot of his silk tie, was the platinum chain. Samira took a breath. Showtime. She grabbed a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and downed half of it to steady her nerves. Then she walked straight toward him. "Hello, Arthur." The lawyer froze. The color drained from his face, as if someone had pulled a plug. He stared at her, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. "Samira," he whispered. "But," Cray said. Cray was wrong. Samira said, her voice smooth and loud enough for the judge to hear. "Aren't you going to introduce me to your friends?" Arthur's eyes darted around the room. He grabbed her elbow, his grip painful. "Excuse us, Judge. An old acquaintance." He dragged her toward the terrace doors. "You're supposed to be dead," he hissed, sweat beading on his upper lip. "If Cray sees you—" "I don't care about Cray," Samira lied. She leaned in close, letting her hand rest on his lapel, inches from the chain. "I care about the fact that I almost died for a deal I wasn't part of. I want in, Arthur. I know where the bodies are buried. I know about the shell companies. I want a payout, and then I disappear." Arthur narrowed his eyes. Greed warred with fear in his gaze. "You want money? 5 million. Wire transfer. Tonight. Or I walk over to that federal judge and tell him exactly how you leveraged the dock workers' pension fund." Arthur swallowed hard. I can't do that here." "Yes, you can. You have the key." She tapped his chest. "Let's go upstairs, to the VIP suite. We do the transfer, and you never see me again." Arthur hesitated. He looked at Cray, who was across the room, holding court with a group of union leaders. Cray hadn't seen her yet. "Fine," Arthur whispered. "Room 402. But if you try anything, I'll kill you myself." "Lead the way, counselor." As they walked toward the elevators, Samira tapped her ear twice. The signal. "He's moving. Room 402. "I'm already there," Damien's voice replied. The elevator ride was suffocating. Arthur stood in the corner, nervously checking his phone. Samira watched the numbers climb. Her heart was beating so hard, She thought the silk of her dress might vibrate. They reached the 4th floor. The hallway was empty. Arthur keyed into room 402, a lavish suite with a view of Central Park. He shoved Samira inside and locked the door. "You have some nerve," Arthur sneered, his fear turning into aggression now that they were alone. "Coming here. Do you know who you're messing with?" "I'm messing with a coward who sells out his clients," Samira said, dropping the act. She stood in the center of the room. Arthur laughed. "A coward, I'm rich, Samira, and you're just a loose end." He reached into his jacket, not for a phone, but for a snub-nosed revolver. "I'm not going to pay you," Arthur said, aiming the gun at her chest. "I'm going to fix Cray's mistake." Samira didn't flinch. She stared him down. "You really should check the room before you start making threats, Arthur." "What?" From the shadows of the heavy velvet curtains a figure emerged. Damien Moretti. He wore a black tactical suit, silent and terrifying. Arthur spun around, but he was too slow. Damien didn't shoot. He moved with the brutality of a sledgehammer. He kicked the gun out of Arthur's hand, the weapon skittering across the marble floor. Then he grabbed Arthur by the throat and slammed him against the wall. A painting crashed to the floor. "Hello, Arthur," Damien said, his voice a low rumble. "I believe you have something of mine." Arthur clawed at Damien's hand, gasping for air. "Dom, please." Damien ripped the platinum chain from Arthur's neck, breaking the clasp. He held the digital key up to the light. It was a small black USB drive with a biometric scanner. "Samira," Damien said, tossing the key to her. Samira caught it. She immediately went to the desk where a hotel computer was set up. She plugged the key in. "I need his thumbprint," Samira said, typing furiously. Damien dragged the sputtering lawyer over to the desk and slammed his hand down on the scanner. "Access granted," the computer chirped. "No," Arthur screamed. "You can't. Cray will kill me." "He's going to try," Damien said, calmly. "Samira, execute the protocol." Samira's fingers flew across the keyboard. She navigated the labyrinth of offshore accounts. She found the guarantee clauses. With 3 keystrokes, she initiated the clawback provision she had discovered in the cabin. Transferring assets to originating pension funds. Processing. "Done," Samira said, letting out a breath she felt she'd been holding for days. "The money is gone, Arthur. The real estate leverage is gone. Cray's loans just went into immediate default." Suddenly, Arthur's phone on the floor began to buzz. Then ping, then ring. It was a cacophony of notifications. "That's the banks," Damien said, checking his watch. "And that," a siren wailed in the distance, getting closer, "is the FBI. We sent them your full ledger about 20 minutes ago." The door to the suite exploded inward. It wasn't the police. Victor Cray stood in the doorway, flanked by 3 armed men. His face was purple with rage. He held a submachine gun. "You think you can steal from me?" Cray roared. Damien shoved Arthur toward Cray, using the lawyer as a human shield, just as Cray opened fire. Arthur screamed as bullets tore into him. He collapsed, paying the ultimate price for his treachery. Damien flipped the heavy oak desk over, grabbing Samira and pulling her behind it. Wood splintered as bullets chewed up the furniture. "We're pinned!" Samira yelled, covering her head. "Not for long," Damien said. He pulled a flashbang grenade from his belt, a gift from Martha's inventory. "Cover your ears." He pulled the pin and lobbed it over the desk. Bang! A blinding white light and a deafening boom filled the room. Cray's men screamed, blinded and disoriented. Damien surged over the desk, his pistol in hand. Pop! 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 3 precise shots. Cray's bodyguards dropped. Only Victor Cray was left stumbling, rubbing his eyes, swinging his gun wildly. Damien walked up to him and kicked the weapon away. He grabbed Cray by the lapels of his tuxedo and dragged him to the open balcony doors. The cold wind whipped into the room. Below, the red and blue lights of police cruisers were flooding the entrance of the hotel. "You hear that, Victor?" Damien whispered. "That's the sound of your empire ending." "You can't prove anything." Cray spat blood on his teeth. "I own this city." "You own nothing," Samira said, stepping out onto the balcony beside Damien. She held up the digital key. "I just wired your entire liquidity to a charity for displaced families. You're broke, Victor." Cray's eyes bulged. You bitch." He lunged at her. Damien intercepted him. He didn't throw him off the balcony. That was too easy. Instead, he swept Cray's legs out from under him and pinned him to the floor knee on his chest. "I'm not going to kill you," Damien said, his voice cold as ice. "Death is too quick. You're going to go to prison, Victor. And in general population, a broke boss is just a target." The door to the suite burst open again. "FBI, drop your weapons!" Damien raised his hands slowly. He looked at Samira. "Trust me," he mouthed. 6 months later, the courtroom was packed. The trial of Victor Cray had been the media event of the decade. The evidence was overwhelming: ledgers, emails, and the testimony of a certain anonymous whistleblower who had dismantled the financial structure from the inside. When the verdict was read, guilty on all counts, including racketeering, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit murder, the gallery erupted. Victor Cray, looking 10 years older and 50 pounds lighter, was led away in shackles. He looked at the back of the room, searching for someone. But Damien Moretti wasn't there. Samira sat at a corner table in a small, sun-drenched cafe in Paris. She was reading the New York Times on her tablet. A small smile played on her lips as she read the headline, "Cray Empire Collapses, the End of an Era." She took a sip of her espresso. She looked different now. Her hair was cut in a chic bob, and she wore a tailored cream suit. She looked like a woman who owned her own destiny. "Is the coffee to your liking?" The voice came from behind her. Deep. Familiar. Samira didn't turn. "It's good. But the water service is terrible." Damien walked around the table and sat opposite her. He wore a casual leather jacket and sunglasses. He looked younger, the weight of the family business lifted from his shoulders. "I heard the verdict," he said. "Justice is served," Samira replied. "And Arthur, his estate was liquidated. His wife got what was left, which wasn't much. The rest went to the pension fund reimbursement." Damien nodded. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He slid it across the table. Samira raised an eyebrow. "What is this A payout?" "Open it." She opened the box. Inside wasn't a ring. It was a key, an old-fashioned heavy iron key. "What does this open?" she asked. "A building in Brooklyn," Damien said. "It used to be a warehouse where my grandfather ran numbers. I bought it back, legitimately." "And what do you plan to do with an old warehouse?" "I'm not doing anything with it," Damien said. "We are." He leaned forward, taking his sunglasses off. His dark eyes locked onto hers. "I'm done with the life, Samira. Cray is gone. The other families are scrambling for scraps. I'm out. I have enough money stashed away to start over. Real estate, legal development, the architect, for real this time." "And where do I fit in?" Samira asked, her heart beating faster. "I need a partner," Damien said. "Someone who reads the fine print. Someone who saves me from signing the wrong papers. Someone who isn't afraid to burn the house down to save the people inside." He reached across the table and took her hand. "Jenkins and Moretti," he said. "Or Moretti and Jenkins. We can argue about the billing order." Samira looked at the key, then at the man who had dragged her into hell and walked her back out. She thought about the adrenaline, the fear, and the undeniable connection that had forged them into something new. She closed her hand around the key. "Jenkins and Moretti," she corrected, "and I get the corner office." Damien smiled, that rare, dazzling smile that made the rest of the world disappear. "Deal." They sat there in the Parisian sunlight, two survivors who had rewritten their own contracts. The waiter came by to refill their water. "More water, madam." Samira looked at the glass, then at Damien and laughed. "Yes," she said, "but check the bottle first." Damien laughed with her a free, genuine sound. He picked up the check. He didn't need to look at the total. He just signed his name, Damien Moretti.